Accused of double murder. William Gohl, agent of Sailors Union, is accused of killing two men. Murders alleged to have been committed in an isolated shack on Indian Creek in December. Charles Hedberg and John Hoffman, victims. Body of Hedberg is found anchored, search being made for that of Hoffman. William Gohl, Grays Harbor agent of the Sailors Union, was arrested this morning and lies in the city jail, charged with murder in the first degree. The story, as it comes to the police, relates the killing of two men in an isolated shack on Indian Creek on Christmas and is filled with gruesome, cold-blooded particulars. The information came from a former friend of Gohl, whose name is withheld for obvious reasons, to whom Gohl confided the story of his double crime. The men said to have been murdered are Charles Hedberg, aged about 23 years, and John Hoffman, about 28 years of age. As the story runs, Hedberg and Gohl were partners in crime for some years. They quarreled, and Gohl feared Hapgood would leak as to his criminal record and decided to put him out of the way. It is known that Gohl had kept Hedberg supplied with money and clothes, and that the latter had for some time been living in a shack on Indian Creek on the north side of the harbor, below Hoquiam. As Gohl is said to have related the crime, he went to this shack on December 24th for the purpose of killing Hedberg, and finding Hoffman at the shack had to include him in his murderous plans. Both men were shot from behind, and their bodies were taken out in the bay and fastened down with anchors. When the police received this information yesterday, Chief Dean, Detective Church, and Undertaker Randolph took a launch and went to the point designated as the anchorage of the body of Hedberg. There the body was found, just as stated, held down by a 25-pound anchor that was identified this morning at the property of Caldwell Bros, which had been stolen. The body of Hedberg was brought to the city and lies at the Randolph morgue, awaiting an inquest. A gunshot wound in the back of the head reveals plainly the cause of his death. A party left this morning for the scene to drag for the body of Hoffman, which is said to be held to the bottom of the bay with a 50-pound anchor, and it will doubtless be discovered today. In the meantime, Gohl is held without bail under the charge of murder in the first degree. Aberdeen Herald, Aberdeen, Chehalis County, February 3rd, 1910, page 1. Suspected of many crimes. William Gohl, Sailors Union agent. Suspected of a number of murders. Maintained shacks in lonely places on Grays Harbor, where victims were inveigled. He had threatened lives of many prominent citizens and terrorized the waterfront, is taken to the county jail. The arrest of William Gohl, an agent of the Sailors Union, last Thursday morning for the murder of Charles J. Hedberg, has proved the greatest criminal sensation in the history of Grays Harbor, and the atmosphere is filled with rumors of so many crimes attributed to Gohl, ranging from murder to picket larceny. That wonder is expressed that the man should have been permitted to go on in his career for over 6 years without being overhauled by the authorities, especially as he had the habit of bragging about his crimes to his companions when in his cups. It is now known that he has for several years owned and maintained shacks in the woods on the shores of Grays Harbor at Indian Creek, Chinois Creek, Grass Creek, and on South Hay. Those shacks were kept, says the man who told where the body of Hedberg would be found, for the purpose of inveigling sailors and loggers who had money and who were murdered and robbed in those lonely localities. Gohl, it is said, as a Union agent, would have the money of sailors in his official safe, and was in the habit of sending them down the harbor on some pretext where his killers would make away with them. Many of the large numbers of floaters that were being found in the waters of Grays Harbor a few years ago are now laid at the door of William Gohl, and the police authorities are positive that some of them represented his crimes. It was known at the time that the number was entirely too great to be accounted for by accidental drowning, but the police seemed unable to fasten the guilt upon anyone. Gohl was taken to the county jail Friday afternoon, not as stated in some papers, because the police were afraid of lynching, but for the very simple reason that it was the proper place for him. It is a state case filed in the Superior Court, and the county jail is the legal place for his custody. Since the finding of the body of Charles Hedberg, the waters in the vicinity of the mouth of Indian Creek have been dredged in search of horror. The body of John Hoffman, who is believed to have been murdered by Gohl along with Hedberg, but so far without success. Hoffman, who had formerly conducted a cigar stand on Heron Street, was at Indian Creek engaged in catching drift logs from the recent freshets and is believed to have carried several $100s on his person. Failure to find the body of Hoffman will allow the Gohl defense to contend that Hoffman killed Hedberg and left the country. To avoid this contention, the authorities will spare no efforts to find that body, and a search is also being made in the vicinity of the other shacks for additional victims. The rumors of his crimes all appear to have originated with Gohl himself, who appeared to have a perfect mania for telling of his deed, sins, well as for murder. Fraud, if a tithe of them he proved true, he will come near breaking the world's record for villainy. He told a businessman of Aberdeen of taking 4 non-union sailors down the bay and forcing them, at the point of a pistol, to get off the boat on a spit that was bare only at low water, and left them there to drown with the incoming tide. He is said to have told Sig Jacobson of shooting a sailor from the window of the Sailors' Union Hall, and told how much of his money he secured. Last year, a Secret Service man obtained his confidence, and to him, he told of the crimes of arson and murder in the burning of the Brunswick Hotel, where George Griswold was burned to death. This, is said, was done to burn out a saloon man named Lee Williams, against whom he had a grudge, and whose place of business was destroyed in the fire. Another reason given for this crime is that Gohl, who had conducted a cigar stand in the burned building, was then going through bankruptcy and had sold the stock of cigars that was reported to the bankruptcy court as on hand, nothing but empty boxes remaining. The fire destroyed the boxes full or empty. The burning of the Zelasco block on Wishka Street, where a lodger lost his life, is also charged to Gohl, who is said to have set the fire to get even with the Aberdeen Ship Chandlery Co., whose place of business was in the block, and who were heavy losers by the fire. His grievance against this company is said to have been that they interfered with certain commissions he had been receiving in the supplying of the ships in port. For this crime, Charles J. Lealy was arrested and acquitted and was put to heavy legal expenses in clearing himself of the charge. Recently, a robe stolen from the automobile of A. L. Davenport was found in a shack belonging to Gohl, and he was charged with the theft. Through the evidence given by Hedberg, whose murder Gohl is now accused of, he was acquitted. In fact, every indication exists that Gohl maintained a set of toughs, part of whose duties was to bear witness for him when Lie should be accused of crimes, or when he desired to accuse an enemy of an offense. This was illustrated in the case against Sig Jacobson for selling liquor on Sunday. Gohl had been friendly with Jacobson and bragged to him of his crimes. Later, he killed a valuable dog of Jacobson's, and they had a falling out. At this time, Mayor Ben was having Gohl's offenses looked into and had a deputy sheriff named Miller, sent here from Montesano, who was employed by the city, ostensibly as dog catcher, but really to watch Gohl. Instead, he became Gohl's tool and kept him informed of every move of the mayor and police and of the information given them by Jacobson. It is now generally believed that Gohl framed up the job on Jacobson, which had him convicted of selling liquor on Sunday after 2 juries had disagreed. Miller is one of the chief witnesses. Gohl gave it out that he was getting inside police information from Officer Kelly, against whom he had a grudge, which caused so much friction in the department as to finally result in the dismissal of Kelly. This case also created friction between Mayor Men and City Attorney Wade. The mayor was confident that Jacobson was a job and was desirous of securing additional information from Jacobson, and after a disagreed jury requested Wade to dismiss the action and was not understood, the mayor rested under a wrong impression in the matter. Miller has since disappeared and is believed to have gone to meet others who knew too much of the affairs of William Gohl. For the past 3 or 4 years, Gohl has had the people of the waterfront terrorized with his threats and known ability to make them good, as well as by his gang of ready witnesses, ready at all times to swear for him or against his enemies. Prominent citizens, too, were threatened. When Gohl found that Mayor Allen was on his trail, he ordered Hedberg to kill him, and the information of his danger reached the mayor through the same channel as did that of the killing of his would-be murderer later on. During the shipping strike in 190G, Gohl threatened the lives of W. Mac, manager of the S.E. Slade Lumber Co., Rupert, manager of the Weston Slade Grocery Co., and a number of others. And for a time there was quite a number of prominent citizens carrying revolvers owing to threats. It is known that at meetings of the Aberdeen Trades Council, upon which Lye represented the Sailors' Union, he advocated the burning of the mills of the city to an extent that made self-respecting, law-abiding members of the council object to sitting with him. Gohl's criminal tendencies came into notoriety in 1905 when he took the armed body of men in a launch down the harbor and attacked the schooner Fearless, which had shipped a non-union crew. The purpose was to capture the crew, but they were observed before they could board the ship and repulsed, after several hundred shots had been fired on both sides. For this crime, Gohl was convicted, and instead of going to the penitentiary, was left with a fine of $1,200, which is said to have been paid by his union. Doubtless, this escape from punishment encouraged Gohl in his pursuit of crime, and whoever is responsible for that escape is, to a large extent, morally responsible for the crimes committed. His conviction occurred in the fall of 1905, yet he was released on bail and was not sentenced until after the primary elections, and he was then let off with a fine. During that campaign, in which Gohl was extremely active, he frequently boasted that although convicted, he would not go the penitentiary, but this was attributed to his braggadocio, and, the offense being so bold and notorious, that Gray's Harbor felt sure of being relieved of this presence for some years, so that the light sentence came as a shock and was not calculated to leave respect for courts that should be in the public mind. Attorney Butner withdrew Friday from the defense of Gohl, and A.M. Abel now has the case. That the defense will fight at every point is already noticed. A move was made Saturday to discredit the identification of the body of Hedberg when a bunch of sailors visited the morgue and declared they knew Hedberg and that the corpse was not his. City Detective Church, who was present, put a quick stop to this when he seized one of the sailors and made him confess that on the previous day he had positively identified the body as that of Hedberg and testified that he had known him well. Again, the Sailors' Union did not attend the funeral of Hedberg, which took place Saturday afternoon, although the deceased had been a member in good standing, and this token of respect is never omitted. This is taken to be the first move of the defense to force the state to prove the death of Hedberg. Aberdeen Herald, February 7, 1910, page 4, transcribed by Carey. Search for body of John Hoffman still continues. Still dragging waters and probing mud flats at Indian Creek. Gohl declares his innocence of Hedberg murder, grand jury needed. The search for the body of John Hoffman, supposed to have been murdered on Indian Creek with Charles Hedberg, has been going on for a week and continues, the authorities being fully aware of the importance of either finding the body or proving Hoffman alive. William Gohl, accused murderer, says he is alive and in Alaska, where he said both men had intended to go. Crews of men are dragging the waters of the vicinity of the mouth of Indian Creek and probing the tide flats on each low tide, and hope of finding the body has not been abandoned. On Monday, a representative of the Washingtonian had an interview with Gohl in the county jail when the prisoner protested his innocence of the crime of which he stands accused, saying that the murdered man was one of his best friends. He said he had warned the police of Aberdeen and the sheriff of cattle stealing on the harbor, and in other ways tried to prevent crimes. On the same day, the Washingtonian published an affidavit of A.W. Jacobson, made August 9, 1990, in which he swears positively to Gohl having admitted to him that he started the fire in the old Brunswick Hotel building, which burned out the block on South P Street between Hume and River Streets, and in which George Griswold was burned to death. The confession goes into minute details, telling that Gohl had an infernal machine, which he told Jacobson was a patent invention of his, which later was used to set this fire, electric connection with the machine being made from Jacobson's saloon across the street. This affidavit was secured by Sheriff Payette last summer, and corroborative evidence has been searched for since. City Detective W. W. Anstey has located Gus Miller, erstwhile city dog catcher and alleged tool of Gohl, at Rainier, Oregon. In the multitude of rumors that sprang into existence upon the arrest of Gohl was one to the effect that perhaps Miller had also been murdered, as having known too much of Gohl's doings. Anstea, the stepson of Miller in Aberdeen, informed him that his stepfather was very much alive and was now in Portland, where he had moved from Rainier. The many reports of crimes alleged to have been committed on Grays Harbor during the past 5 years that have been circulated since the arrest of Gohl, some of which have been admitted by Gohl, has led to a demand for a grand jury to clear up the various affairs charged. As matters stand, the police of Aberdeen and the sheriff's office are working on the cases without a definite plan or authority to incur the necessary expense. With a proper grand jury, a systematic investigation of all the alleged crimes could be made by a body fully authorized law, and unhampered by a fear that all required service in unearthing crime would not be allowed. There has not been a grand jury in Chehalis County in 26 years, every attempt to have one called having been denied on the alleged ground of expense. With all the crimes known to have been committed with impunity on Grays Harbor of late years, surely the necessity for a thorough inquisition cannot be denied. Chehalis County cannot afford to give out to the world that life and property are not safe within her borders on account of the cost of detecting crime. Aberdeen Herald, February 10, 1910, page 1. So you think you know the story of Billy Gohl, Aberdeen's infamous mass murderer who dropped his victims into the Wishkah River, creating what became known as the Floater Fleet on Grays Harbor? The man who killed upward of 100 people between 1906 and 1909? Billy the Ghoul of Grays Harbor? Forget everything you think you know about Gohl and reach for a copy of Aberdeen native Aaron Going's new book, The Port of Missing Men, Billy Gohl, Labor, and Brutal Times in the Pacific Northwest. Through extensive and carefully endnoted research, Goings effectively upends over a century of lore surrounding William Billy Gohl, the Aberdeen agent for the Sailors' Union of the Pacific, convicted in May 1910 for the first-degree murder of Charles Hadberg. Goings, associate professor of American history at St. Martin's University for well over a decade, has of late been actively writing new chapters of Grays Harbor's history. His co-authored Red Coast, published last year, explored the red elements of Southwest Washington, chronicling the industrial workers of the world regionally, Aberdeen's anti-Chinese policies of the 1890s, labor strikes, the harbor's 1912 free speech fight, and much more. Going's newest offering is what Grays Harbor history buffs have been missing for decades, a methodically researched and evidence-based analysis of the Billy Gohl story. As a Grays Harbor historian, I freely admit that I had not previously done my homework regarding Billy Gohl. I'd read Hollis B. Fultz's chapter on Gohl in Northwest Manhunts and Murder Mysteries, squinted at Robert Weinstein's purported photo of Gohl in Grays Harbor, 1885 to 1913, and accepted as fact Pamela Dean Aho's Ghoul of Grays Harbor contribution to On the Harbor. I'd never seriously questioned these and other authors, and like so many before me, I blindly accepted that Gohl must indeed be a mass murderer. Aaron Goings, on the other hand, has long held skepticism of the popular history surrounding Gohl. Goings' self-described entry point into the world of Billy Gohl started in 2001 while doing microfilm research in the Aberdeen Daily World on labor history for his PhD thesis. As detailed in the book's preface, August 10, 1911, the headline titled "Businessmen Helped Convict Gohl" caught his attention and sparked what would ultimately become a multi-year endeavor to scour every record available regarding the life and times of Billy Gohl. What specifically caught Going's attention in that 1911 article was an Aberdeen City Council debate regarding the use of public funds to pay private Thiel Detective Service agents hired in 1909 to 1910 to investigate and ultimately help convict Gohl for murder. As a historian well-versed in the anti-labor deeds of men employed by the likes of the Thiel, Curtin, Burns, and Pinkerton agencies, Goings saw in that one article a much larger story demanding further investigation. He understood that in this time period, These agencies had a well-documented track record of nefariously breaking labor unions across the nation. He set out to discover if the militant labor union leader Billy Gohl was in fact the target of Grays Harbor employers acting collectively to eliminate Gohl as a threat to their businesses. As Goings so presciently notes in his introduction, of all the convicted murderers in the region's early history, Gohl was the only one capable of shutting down the highly profitable Grays Harbor lumber trade. The Port of Missing Men is so much more than just the story of Billy Gohl's trial for murder. Here, biography is given deep context, especially through an understanding of place and time, as illustrated by the chapter Billy Gohl's Grays Harbor, which paints a picture of the harbor's meteoric growth during a period when capital and labor frequently clashed. Gohl's Grays Harbor, according to Goings, was a place of shocking brutality and gross exploitation, where Gohl actively worked to ameliorate the worst of these ills. Throughout the book, but especially in the chapter Union, Goings analyzes a growing class inequality on the harbor. He describes the struggle of the working class to obtain better pay, working conditions, and hours alongside the efforts of employers to thwart those goals. In describing the hazardous working conditions in Grays Harbor Industries, Goings characterized workers of the era as having spent their lives with one foot in the grave. Indeed, industrial accidents were an almost daily occurrence at that time, with injury and even death commonplace. In Goings' estimation, workers faced the real possibility that a spinning saw or falling logs would get them, and were all too often pushed to alcoholism and suicide by the depression-inducing conditions of capitalism. The crux of this class struggle, according to Goings, was that this collective misery, as much as anything, was the real ghoul of Grays Harbor. By quantifying statistics found in the archival record of deaths for the city of Aberdeen and the Chehalis County Coroner's record, Goings makes a convincing case that the so-called floater fleet was not the work of a mass murderer, but rather an unregulated and dangerous waterfront working environment. Drownings were remarkably common among the population of the day, many resulting from accidents aboard ships or falls from docks and log rafts, all too often precipitated by the mixing of men and their liquor. The death toll, laid at the hands of Gohl by the press, was quite possibly the result of Grays Harbor's hazardous waterfront. At 277 total pages, the book includes 50 pages of endnotes that provide ample evidence of the detailed research done to support this thesis. Goings scoured various university archives, state penitentiary records, census records, city directories, and labor union records. Newspaper accounts of the day further proved invaluable in telling this story, and Goings left no local paper unread. The Aberdeen World, Grays Harbor Washingtonian Grays Harbor Post, Aberdeen Herald, Chehalis County Vidette, and Aberdeen Daily Bulletin all are heavily referenced. More obscure publications such as the Coast Seaman's Journal and Pacific Lumber Trade Journal also provided crucial context. And notably, the Chehalis County, Grays Harbor Superior Court records gave extensive documentation of Gohl's trial and proceedings.